Welcome back to the first session of today. And it's titled Governing Global Commons. And then I would like to introduce the panelists. Arunabha Ghosh, CEO, CEEW. Hiroaki Kitano, Executive Deputy President and CTO, Sony Group Corporation. Amel Saidane, CEO, Betawaves. Then last but not the least, Bakker, CEO and President of WBCSD. And I will be moderating this session. So, I hope that you enjoyed the keynote followed by conversation, and I hope it sets a kind of scene for the conversation for this session. And then so the challenge, the task in front of you as a panel is how you could really take the message from science, which is really cutting edge now, and then how you can actually provide a solution to that challenge. So I have two rounds of questions for this panel. The first question is how we human could, should, will update our economic system or social system, because as Johan said and we said, that the fact we have seen now is basically collision of the current human economic system with the limitation of the planetary Earth system. So it's really our turn to shift our system, but how? So the first question is the system transformation. And we all know it's very challenging. We are a bit of stuck and we need a new lever, but how to create and concrete and strengthen this lever to move into the to actually update the system. So that is the first question. I just want to also mention to you, for your reference, the second round of question is much more challenging one. It's a governing global commons. So that that needs a lot of creativity, imagination, and the challenge. But then that's going to be the second round of question. So with that, let me start with the transformation question. And on that one, I actually want to invite Peter, that the CEO and the president of WBCSD. You always emphasize the role of business to promote the system transformation, and your new strategy 2050 also shows several pathways, and also that the 3 mindset shift and then the 5 enablers, How successful it has been, and how you want to really use it for system change.
Well, success always has 2 sides of the story, you know. To what Johan just said, we need speed and scale, and we need implementation. And if you look at the stats that science is producing in the planetary health check, there is no success because the boundaries are still running away from us. But I would actually say in business, there's been a real shift. There is no more debate around climate change except for a few pockets of self-interested companies, but the majority of business is now on this agenda. Decarbonization is a big part of the strategies. 1.5 degrees has been a well-accepted norm. You know, I remember I was about 7 or 8 months into the role in WBCSD when I met Johan for the first time on Jeju Island, South Korea, for the IUCN World Congress. I was, I think, the first ever business speaker in the plenary room. And I opened that speech by saying, hello, I am a capitalist, which in those days in the IUCN World Congress seemed to be a rather courageous opening of a speech. But what I said is there is nothing wrong with capitalism. It is the way we apply capitalism to only focus on financial capital and not focus on natural and on social capital. A few months later, I said, accountants will save the world, which again, despite only in offices of the big 4 would get applause, everywhere else people would laugh. But it is happening now, and this is now, I think, for business, the fundamental unlock. How do we truly integrate sustainability into the performance and accountability mechanisms in business. And in climate in particular, we've seen the build of a very powerful set of frameworks. It started off with TCFD, which, you know, Japanese businesses has embraced more than any other country in the world. We have SBTI, even though it had some turbulence in recent months, but the target setting framework was there. We now have ISSB as a global baseline for disclosures of climate, and CSRD in particular in Europe for further disclosure elements. So this framework is being built. The next step is these must become mandatory disclosure frameworks so that all businesses are forced to measure and then disclose comparable standardized information. The minute that that happens, we can see that company A is doing more than company B, that company A is making progress and company B is staying behind, and then we can have real conversations with management teams, with the supervisory board of those companies about the need to do more. The missing link at the moment, and that's a fundamental missing link, is there's no bridge into the capital markets. There's a big misalignment between the way companies are valued or capital is allocated and the performance of a business that we see today. And that, therefore, is a critical component to focus on going forward. Once we achieve that alignment, accountability and performance management in business with capital market allocation according to that performance, then we will see a massive acceleration of efforts. Maybe one more minute on what Johan is telling us now, because the Global Commons Alliance has produced so much progress, and thank you for your leadership in driving us all together and even bringing all of us here in Tokyo today. Again, is the message of Johan is a message that business across the world must hear. Even if we phase out all fossil fuels today, which is hard enough, we will not be able to stay below 1.5 degrees. We must invest in nature. So climate and nature are not two separate topics where you have a climate strategy and you're trying to find a nature strategy. This is one strategy that business must now embrace. We must decarbonize our operations and supply chains. We must invest in nature. And that's, I think, the key message from this year's update. And that means in the accountability frameworks, we also need to step up nature.
Thank you, Peter. It's very crystal clear. Now, I want to ask Kitano-san. You are from Sony, you are the CTO of Sony. And there is always a kind of expectation in the society or in the business, oh, technology will solve the problem. And when that uncertainties are relevant and everywhere, let's wait and see. Maybe that there is a good progress and this technology who could save us from this challenge. So that in your view, what's the role of technology in this system transformation and beyond?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for asking that question. I think that people expect technology to solve things. That's reality. I mean, that's actually, I often ask, like, what is a new technology that solves things? I mean, technology is not a magic wand. I mean, you know, and then people expect technology bring about like innovations. And sometimes people abusively use the term innovations. Sometimes means a new technology equals innovation. That is completely untrue. And I think whenever you have like a big innovation, like I think we really need the innovation in a true sense, in a, you know, solve this problem, or even for the mitigating the issue we are facing. And we need good science, major scientific discovery, technology breakthrough to bring the science into the reality. And those are really the component people view as a technological breakthrough, and that's not enough. And we need to have identified the problem to be solved, and that's big enough and a high impact. But like, that is rather obvious today. And then what you need is that is not enough, and then we need the radical solutions. You need to transform the way we do things to solve the big problem using a technology. Without the departure of the approach from the traditional approach to the new solution, which enabled by the technology, we're not going to solve a problem. For example, I think we have a range of technology we can contribute significantly to the issue. For example, the microgrid systems, like renewable energy, and solar photovoltaic or biomass, wind, can be multiple sources. And energy storage can be the battery or the lithium-ion or even the hydrogens. And then, microgrid technology is there, and then you can actually dynamically relocate and, moving electricity around, from this place to the other place. That's available. And I actually is also the professor at the OIST, Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, which actually did experimental work for the microgrid solutions. We powered the 20 faculty housing, not experimental house, like a real family living. And then we provided we set up a solar photovoltaic and lithium-ion and connected them to dynamically relocating electricity. And we achieved 95 to 97% grid independence. Okay, so that is possible. But at the same time, if we are to scale this, you have to completely change the grid architecture. You have to have a spread of like a microgrid before they are connected to the main grid. Right now, the problem with the electric company is because of the emergence, increasing generation power of the renewable, there's a grid instability, or they have to cut off. And if you buffer them with the microgrid system, they can fully utilize the renewable and while avoiding grid instability. But that means you need a lot of infrastructure investment. Or like a biodiversity, there are like a mechanism approach like a cynical culture which harness the biodiversity. At the same time, how are you going to invest on this, short run? The industrial farming, monoculture is very efficient in the short run, but the long run, you need to harness the biodiversity so it can be more sustainable. But what is the economic incentive for this? So I think we need technologies. It's there, fragmented, it's there. I think we need radical departure from the current model, and we need to incentivize it. I think that's really the issue.
Thank you. It's really inspiring to hear. Yeah, how to really coordinate and steer this fragmented technology towards the one coordinated direction. Okay, so now I want to go to Amel. You are another voice from technology business, tech business, but also you are from Africa region. So can you tell us what the system transformation means in your region, in your context, and how you want to really disrupt or ignite a disruption in the system?
Beautiful. Thank you, Naoko. Hi, everyone. So we have heard it earlier from science that we are in front of a potentially mass extinction. So as an entrepreneur, another capitalist trying to align to do well while doing good. So maybe this is an amazing opportunity that we have in front of us. Because as an entrepreneur, the bigger this is the way I see the world, the bigger the pain point, the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity, actually. So, and then on the other side, we know that this is a topic that is well understood among the sustainability circle, among the people who are in the room. However, it's not really understood by mainstream, or even it's heard among mainstream economists, financiers, bankers, etc. And as you might know, it's not scientists who have the biggest influence on policies today. It's more that group of people who have the most influence. So maybe that's why all the agreements that have been committed all throughout the years are not delivering properly. So this is maybe one of the questions we need to ask ourselves, why we are not delivering on all the agreements. So we understand that this is actually a global challenge, and that this is hurting our planet, and that we need to find out about a new economic system that's more geared toward abundance. And the question is now, what type of thinking do we need? We need a free type of thinking. I'm trying to challenge us to think completely from a clean slate. So what if we were given a new planet today? What would we do with that? We need a thinking that is powered by technology, and we know that policymakers today are not really have a poor understanding of what emerging technologies can do to support this radical change or transformative change. So imagine a world that is based on distributed ledger technology, for instance, giving a voice to every individual. And as Professor Rockström earlier said, the change can only happen if every single person is doing the right thing. And this could be enabled by this distributed ledger that is giving a voice to the 6 billion people who are here as just as spectators, because we have 2 billion people who are involved in this game, in this global game of competition, of scarcity, and everyone else is just watching because they're just left out of the game. So because they don't have an ID, they don't have they don't have a tax number, they just out of the system. So the question is, how can we accelerate this transformation leveraging technology? The idea is to create a system, and this abundance type of thinking can be really enabled through new emerging technologies like Gen AI. I know that the unit economics are not making that much sense everywhere in every use case with generative AI, because it's actually just happening. It's just a new technology. But this is going to come in the coming very quickly, far quicker than we think. So the generative AI is growing today at 10x. It's going to grow in the coming 2 years, maybe at 100x. It's doing way more than we have ever imagined. So I could never have ever imagined that I have a team of McKinsey consultants working for me at every point in time through as in a format of a digital agent. This is unbelievable 3 years ago. So this Gen AI will be able to create new products soon, buy and sell new products, negotiate contracts very soon. So we can do really, really way more with this technology, and we should be prepared to shift our economic model towards an economic model that's based on abundance and not scarcity. Now a quick glimpse towards Africa, and thank you for bringing up the Africa point. So whatever trajectory the humanity will take will be really defined by the fate that we will be giving to Africa, for better and for worse. Because Africa is 2.5 billion people in 2050. It's 40% of the world economy of the world population by end of the century. So, and on another note, the median age in Japan is actually 48 years. The median age in Nigeria is 18 years old. So this means that the biggest part of the population will be still alive to watch what's happening in 2080. So, and this is a major responsibility on our side, and for instance, also with regard to policy making in climate, because we are deciding, we're shaping their world, actually, the world they will be living in. And for them to be, for these countries, for Africa to be able to reap the benefits of digital, of the youth divide, of demographic divide, we need a minimum of infrastructure. A minimum of infrastructure to be able to leverage or to build on this. And we have an Africa that has the poorest level of electrification globally. It's just 40%. And for the current economic system to be able to transform this, we'll have to fund this transformation. So to be able to have everyone electrified with the water supply and sanitation in Africa, this will cost 150 billion per year, and this will only be able to be provided through debt, because the current economic system is working with debt. So, and this will burden again these countries, and it's just not working because they are not producing enough economic growth to be able to compensate for this debt. So the current economic system will not solve it. One more point, last point, is like the representativity of Africa in the global narrative, in the global debate. And since we need a global solution, not a national solution, not a regional solution, so Africa is only represented by South Africa in the G20. Africa has no permanent seat in the Security Council. So I'm more than grateful that Africa has a voice today in the conversation. Thank you, Naoto.
Thank you, Amel. You brought so many important points, and particularly you're mentioning that the current economic system for Africa is based on kind of debt. It's because that the current economic system puts so much emphasis on financial capital, and under the current system, it just doesn't help country, a region like Africa. So we will continue that conversation in the second round. But before that, I want to ask that come to Arunabha. You are actually at the interface of many, many things. The research of the energy and water, and also policy and politics maybe. And you represent India at many occasions at the G20. So that you are actually having a footprint of almost everywhere. And so from your point of view, maybe first question is how we could really update, well, I don't know if it's a right word or not, but transform the current economic system to respond to the newest science.
Thank you. Thank you, Naoko, for having me and all of us here in this important conversation. I'm going to respond to your question by picking up on one theme that Johan said and one theme that you brought up in your initial conversation. Johan very rightly said, look, we've got to change the system, but by working with the system that we've got today, rather than just theoretically imagine something completely different. And you put up that very interesting graphic, Naoko, which you've presented at CEEW as well last year, I think last October, on these different system changes. So I propose that before we get into the global governance change for governing global commons, let's see what we can do from the national perspective. And I see two vectors there. One is the subnational vector, and the second is the national vector. And let me just illustrate this with a few examples. The subnational vector is really where often resources in large complex economies are actually getting governed. So we can say water belongs to the global commons. We can say water belongs within a national boundary, but the governance of water often actually is very localized. The same applies to, say, air. The same applies to land and soil, right? So unless we can figure out the leverage points at that subnational level, we are going up against a political economy that's simply not working. So the first opportunity then is to work on the global commons or work on commons from the perspective of the quality of life of citizens. Let's take air as an example. At CEEW, we work on air quality at a subnational level, national level, and even at a global level, as you know now. But let me hold up something like this, right? This is a brick of green brass, not green steel, green brass. Brass is an alloy. It's made in tiny workshops by small, medium enterprises, unventilated rooms using coal, smelting at 1200 Celsius. It's bad for human health, bad for air quality, bad for greenhouse gas emissions. And what we did was we designed a furnace where we substituted cooking gas, much cleaner, for coal, and for the first time melted brass in India at 1200 Celsius without any use of coal, 98% reduction of the PM 2.5 emissions and 55% reduction of the GHGs. Why I say this is, this kind of bringing the energy transition closer to people and communities gets you the political buy-in, the political sustainability for sustainability. The other thing we have to do, and Peter brought this up, we have to start as capitalists investing in nature. So one of the things we've been doing is let's look beyond the energy transition to other vectors of economic development. And in just one very fossil fuel dependent state in India, we evaluated about 29 different sort of value chains, only some of which were energy transition, but many more about bioeconomy and nature-based economy and circular economy. That one state alone is offering a $90 billion opportunity for this new paradigm of the green economy. But what's more interesting is that the employment coefficient in the nature-based economy is about 8.5x of the employment coefficient in the energy transition economy. Both are good for the planet, but the first is better for the politics as well. So then, if we start working at that subnational level, there are two other quick things at the national level, and Peter has already kind of hinted, as did Kitano-san. We have to start reimagining the power systems of the future. this linear approach that someone's going to generate power, someone's going to transmit it, someone's going to distribute it, is holding us back from leveraging technology, digitalization, and decarbonization in a much more distributed way where we are trading electrons in a peer-to-peer way rather than in this kind of linear system way. The same applies for industrialization at scale. It's not, as Johan said, just about climate. We've got to focus on industrialization with material circularity. How do we reduce the footprint of the materials going into making the things that we need? Those are national level things that need to change. So now let me stop there. I've illustrated some examples of the subnational and the national. Maybe in the next round I can come back to the global.
Well, it's interesting that those multi-layer approach seems to be a very good angle to employ. So now we are going to the second round on the 20 minutes. Because the conversation is so rich, rather than my asking each one of you to talk something, I just want to open the floor for panelists that who want to come first and to pick up any of the points already raised. Okay, Kitano-san. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is really an important point because we have to mobilize we have to mobilize all sectors of the society, including all the companies, right? I mean, I think it's really a key. And then the reality is like we want to understand this our planet, and it's a complex, adaptive, symbiotic system. And I'm biologist as well. I mean, this kind of system is adapted to specific conditions, but it will be very fragile against other conditions. And if CO2 is for example, is one of the point of fragility that exerts on the system, I think that's really the focus. And probably if biodiversity, the secondary one, or parallel, two most important thing, and we go for the CO2 and the biodiversity, because if it's a mobilized industry, you can't have too many measures. Because all the management is, I wouldn't say simple-minded, but they are actually pressured to go for the EPS, profit margins, and then the forward guidance. So if you want to mobilize this, we have to give them a KPI. KPI need to be simple. KPI need to impact their EPS and the profit margin and the forward guidance. How we can actually bring simplest possible high impact for control over the tipping point mechanism, and then get there. I think it's really important because there's a lot of academic discussion intergovernment, but some of who are very aware of this climate issues, the global environmental issues, will care about it. Most of the management, they don't care. They don't even know. They don't want to look at it because it doesn't contribute to EPS. So what is a single most effective means to mobilize the industry, corporate sector is have most effective, simple, possible, forcible measure that impacts their performance, which is EPS, profit margin, and forward guidance.
It's going to be the invitation to Peter, right? You cannot wait.
I can't miss this goal. So no, it's true. I mean, for too long, the conversation about sustainability or even decarbonization has been about you have the responsibility to save the world, which just doesn't work in boardrooms. So yes, we need to completely change corporate governance, all the stuff around target setting, disclosures, but it will hit the EPS much faster than any business in this room realizes. And the way to think about it is, what are the physical risks in your supply chain today? I've given the example a few times over, but there's a beverage company, $12 billion revenue, $1.5 billion EBITDA, that has mapped all the locations in the world where they grow commodities to make whiskey and wine and other things. For each location, weather models, climate models, scenarios being run on how will climate impact the yield, how will yield, which in all cases declines because of floods and droughts, how will yield impact the commodity prices, which will go up, how will commodity prices impact the P&L or the EPS of that business. The answer is, in the base case scenario of that company, and this is a real company that has done the work, 5 years from now, the EBITDA will be 0. This is how close physical risk now is in supply chains. No business in this room, no business in any other room where I get to talk, have done the analysis. And so the suggestion that climate change has nothing to do with EPS, with the urgency that science is now presenting to us, is false. It is EPS 5 years from now down the tube.
Beautiful. Who do you wanna? Okay, Amel.
I'd love to continue, but again from a startup perspective, we'll definitely should continue to work with the system because this is something that's unavoidable. The system is there, but how about thinking of a completely new social contract, just like a startup that's trying to disrupt the system on the side, with not much noise. We don't need to talk about it that much, but really engage in a disruptive approach, like an Uber, for example. Uber didn't ask for a permission from taxis to start disrupting completely the system, and it was not about enhancing the quality of the seats in the taxis. It was completely destroying the business of the taxis. And this is the way I would like us to probably consider thinking, because systems. The history has shown that systems that are hurting humanity ended up being abolished. Like I'm taking just an example to shock us. So look at slavery, for example. The humanity took a long time to notice and to understand that it's actually bad for us, bad for humanity. And the system didn't really, we didn't enhance slavery. We didn't say, okay, we'll just beat them every second day, not every day. So we need to abolish this. We need to stop this because it's hurting humanity. Maybe what's happening right now with the planet is a bit more subtle because it's not hurting the humanity today. It's just engaging irreversible trends, so we don't feel it on our bodies yet, or even though we should actually start feeling it, at least with the heat. But what we should really consider is this type of radical thinking when it comes to changing these systems. So having a governance that is built around distributed ledger technology, for instance, will also contribute to disintermediating. So we don't need the intermediaries. We don't need to have central banks anymore because technologically, we can work without intermediaries. We can work without policymakers. So we can really transform our thinking from this competition scarcity that comes only from limited resources that we have to fight for, to an abundance type of system that is based on, that will lead us to cooperation, actually. And the abundance can be started through the right use of technology and nature. So what we need is a system that is inspired by nature and accelerated, powered, enabled by technology. Because nature has shown us that cooperation is more prevalent in nature than competition. We can use just the human body as an example. The human body is 50 to 100 trillion cells that work in sync, in flow together. No competition, no dominance, no instruction, but every cell is working for the common good. And this is what we need to have through this distributed governance, so that we can have a voice. Even though I happen to be born in a country in Africa, I need to have the same contribution to the global good like everyone else. We can use as inspiration also the bees, the ants, whatsoever. But what we probably could do now out of this event is actually, as part of our commitment, to start a group of disruptors. People who can think out of the box, entrepreneurs combined with scientists, combined with anyone who can think differently, get it funded somehow, somewhere, and then meet again next year and see how far we came in terms of disrupting the system. So what we need is actually active, disruptive, unapologetic action today.
It's a wonderful invitation to all of us, by the way. I like the idea of this coalition with the disruptors, and I will think about it seriously, because we need to also reach to the capital market, as Peter always reminded us of. So I want to ask Arunabha that your second round, and particularly if you could mention, also touch upon this current trade and investment system, to be fair, not to be fair, and what does it mean to the global south?
Yeah, so I'm going to, I'm now reflecting on governance because I completely agree with what Amel said. We generally have to either be the disruptors or enable the disruptors or get out of their way, right? And only one of those three outcomes is desirable. And at CEEW, we are constantly supporting startups in helping them scale and get through the technology valley of death. But from a governance perspective, Naoko, I want to pose it as a counterfactual, right? Suppose in 2017, we were told that in 3 years, there is going to be a global pandemic, but we don't know where it's going to start and how it's going to spread. But there's a certainty that there's going to be a global pandemic. How would we have approached this from a governance perspective? I think all economies would have ramped up their public health surveillance in the minimum. Some economies with some resources might have ramped up their vaccine stockpiling. Some economies might have ramped up their vaccine production capabilities. And maybe a subset of economies would have said, I can only do X myself. If I have to do 2X or 3X, I need some partners and allies. Now in 2024, Johan Rockström is saying it's a certainty almost that something really bad is going to happen very soon. Which of those tipping points is going to tip over first and exactly how it will pan out, we will see. So let's apply that sort of philosophical notion of the veil of ignorance. We use the veil of ignorance, John Rawls' concept, from an income perspective, right? Suppose I were the poorest, then what kind of situation would I need? How about applying the veil of ignorance from a planetary emergency point of view? Now, we know something bad is going to happen. We just don't know, is it going to happen in Japan first, or in India first, or in Tunisia first, right? If we took that approach, I think we begin to reimagine governance frameworks. At a supranational level, we start thinking about this as monitoring the planetary emergency. Recognizing we're already in a planetary emergency, but monitoring the planetary emergency because any one of us could be behind that veil of ignorance. At a national level, we start building up the production capabilities, the resilience capabilities to deal with that disruption. At a corporate level, just like Peter was saying, we've just finished a study for the Confederation of Indian Industry, the largest body of Indian businesses, on a hyper-local mapping of climate risks in India that CEEW has done. So that Indian industry can then decide where they put in physical assets. The next $100 million of capex that's going in, are you sure it's not going to get flooded in 3 years' time? Right? And then we are still left with one more system that needs to change. That is the system of international trade and investment. Because individually, even if we went behind the veil of ignorance, even if we started monitoring it supranationally, we will know we have the limits of capacity, fiscal and others, of what we can do on our own. So we have to stop thinking we can solve this problem by making our large major economies individual protectionist islands. If Japan thinks it can manufacture every solar panel on the planet, and China thinks it can manufacture every solar panel on the planet, and America thinks that, this is a suboptimal route from an economics point of view and a planetary point of view. What we need is component-wise, materials-wise comparative advantage, genuinely develop codependent, interdependent, resilient global value chains that are focused on the economy of the future. I've just written about this in Foreign Affairs on an India-US green trade corridor, but can spread across larger major economies as well. So let's start putting ourselves behind that veil of ignorance because that warning bell has already been rung. And now let's reimagine the governance that flows from it.
Wow. Great call. Anybody wanna? Oh yeah, Kitano-san.
It's a really interesting discussion, particularly like, the comment by the Peter talking about like EPS is going to go down. Okay, so I think very effective, like, of course, like agriculture sectors, like, fishery sector, I think they know that. They are very serious about this. I have heard like many comments on this, like this, but also some of them, sometimes like there are regions that benefit from the global warming as well. So it's, in the short run, I guess. But I think it's very interesting if you see the report, the e-commerce sector hit, for example. Or like something considered to be remote from this impact will be hit. Like a telco get hit, e-commerce get hit. Because like those industries, they think this is something in the future. They at least like if CEO is sitting at, their seat, probably not going to be the major thing. So, okay, I focus on the thing up on front. But like, in the future something happens, but that's not me. Okay, so like if you have like this report, like, because of the climate issue, because of this, global, planetary boundary issues, e-commerce hit, telco hits, consumer electronics hit, transportation hits, then they'll help liable for ignorance. So I think it's like I think it's very important to have a report like this if we have to seriously mobilize those companies.
Peter?
Well, it's actually a dinner conversation we had last night. The difficulty with looking into these risks is it's quite difficult to do it as an individual company. Because if you're a listed company, once you know your risk, you have to disclose it. And then you will be punished for being the first one to have looked into the issue. So the conversation we're having is we should do it by sector so that we can show that, the e-commerce or whatever sector we look at, what are potential impacts. And then you turn it over to board saying, now you need to figure out how this applies to your operations and your supply chain. Because that's the big unlock. It's not about where your plant or your offices are, it's where your supply chains run. And so it is quite foreseeable that there's no industries or very few industries which will not be impacted. And that's going to be the big exercise.
So whenever I hear a risk, I hear actually an opportunity, because for me it's like a wealth of use cases. We build startups in climate, so and these are B2B startups. So any use case is really cool for us, because this is what we really looking for to solve. But the cool thing about what you were saying is like no company is actually too big to fail if they don't foresee the risks, and even the planet Earth is not too big to disappear. Is eventually just a blue pale dot somewhere in the cosmos.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just want to go back to Arunaba's point of thinking about, okay, supranational. Here is a monitoring global situation room or something like that. Then at the national level or sector level, there is another kind of control room, then how to measure the physical risk and its implication. That's going to be beautiful model. And my question for the panelists is, in order to really realize or to become closer to it, what kind of levers we need? Because politically, I found it's quite challenging to even imagine it. But can we really come close, bring us close to that kind of model? So what are the kind of things we need to push? Any view, Peter?
Yeah, so there's lots of COPs coming up. So in 2 weeks from now, some of us will be in Colombia to talk about the biodiversity COP. In a month from now, we'll be in Azerbaijan to talk again about the climate COP. And I think the key takeaway that I already said from Johan's talk is climate and nature, or climate and biodiversity, are not separate items, they're one item. So one question is, why do we organize separate COPs for these things? Why do we not have one meeting to talk about these things? But anyway, that's the UN and not easy to change. The other thing, in the climate COP, COP30 next year, the countries are asked to come up with more ambitious NDCs, national promises of decarbonization. And we've seen that none of the NDCs so far are on track to be delivered. So why do we need more promises when nothing gets delivered? The unlock there, and that's really what we need to push for, is we don't need more ambitious NDCs. We need NDCs that are linked to real economy transition plans. Companies, sectors having implementation plans to change that add up to an NDC that meets the targets of science. And so then you're back at country level. Country A, what are the industries, what are the transition plans, and add it up to an NDC and bring that to COP30.
And probably also NDCs that are that have paths to be financed as well. So to make them realistic. And for politics, maybe one more word that could help. It's prototyping. Just because you only still believe what you can see, or at least it could be helpful. So if we manage to design our sustainable future or vision of a new social contract, we should immediately start prototyping our way to it, towards it, and this could help convince the politics.
Kitano-san, 20 seconds.
I think there's a lot of interesting ideas falling there, and then a lot of technologies. It's fragmented. So I think what we need is something to bridge them together. So we see this planetary boundary ideas. This is well accepted, and then but at the same time, from the corporate sector, what is the implication of this for our sector? And that's the issue. And then what we're supposed to do, what is action item for us? I mean, I think if we, any action that bridge the gap, I think would be very useful.
Arunabha.
Investment. I think if you really want to change the governance, the politics that will yield a desire for different governance, I think money needs to start flowing, which will give governments a reason to give up some of their sovereignty in return for a lot more investment.
Exactly. So international trade financial system also needs to be reformed. Good. So it's really many great ideas. We need to follow it up, and maybe we can come back a year later. But then all of our efforts and ideas really have to be true to science. I think that's going to be a key takeaway from this session. So thank you so much, and please give them a round of applause.